this is Lori from the Transformed Wife, and I want to talk to you about how we trained our children to obey. It's imperative that you teach your children to obey the first time you tell them to do something. It'll benefit them their whole life. You're teaching them self-control and self-discipline. It's a wonderful gift to give to your children. And the way we disciplined our children is we started very young to teach them what no meant. Like when they started to crawl and they would go towards a light switch and want to touch the light switch, we would just smack their hand a little bit. Not to injure them, but to train them. We'd say no. We'd smack their hand and say no. So they knew that pain was associated with no. Because sin always has consequences. And so the sooner that they learn no and to be able to have self-control to discipline their flesh, the better their lives will be. And the purpose for disciplining your children, especially when you get to the spanking age, when they start having temper tantrums and a strong will, which they a lot of times are born with practically, but about 18 months to 2 years old, they'll have their first temper tantrum. Hopefully not sooner. But what you're trying to break is their stubborn, selfish will. Not their will, but their stubborn, selfish will. You are going to try to break that stubborn, selfish will going their way and turn it to the parents' way as they're younger. And then as they get older, you're going to turn it towards God's way. You want them to walk in godliness. You want their will to go with God's will. You want their will to be God's will. So that is your goal as a parent, to break the stubborn, selfish will and to make it a godly will that wants to please the Lord. And so the way that you do that is the first temper tantrum they have, each of our children had one, and that was it. That we wouldn't let them have any more than that because we dealt with it. Now, before I go on about spanking, you have to make sure your government approves of it. And what we use is a strap. It's about this long, 12 inches and about this thick, bendable. Didn't bruise our children at all. We always did it on the bottom, and we didn't do it in anger. Beating, bruising is totally unacceptable. Pulling hair, slapping face, punching, none of that. You don't want to abuse your children. The purpose of disciplining, spanking your children is to train them towards their stubborn, selfish will, to a godly will, to wanting to please the Lord, to goodness and doing the right thing. So the first temper tantrum that they had, Ken and I would take turns. We'd say, okay, put your toys in the back away. And they didn't want to. This was their stubborn will, selfish will coming out full blown. They did not want to do what we told them to do. So Ken and I took turns. It took 4 hours with almost all of them to get that first stubborn, selfish will, temper tantrum out of the way. And it worked. We took turns. It was hard, but we would say, okay, pick up your toys. And they'd cry and cry, no, no. And so they wouldn't do it. So we'd smack their hand at that age. Pick up your toys. And so finally, they would, after about 3 or 4 hours, that stubborn, selfish will would break, and you can just sense it in their spirit. They would just start crying and picking up their toys and then we would just hug them and love them, and explain to them why we spanked them. And then after that first major temper tantrum that all of them had, if they were caught lying to us or they didn't obey us, when we said, okay, go pick up your room, and then I want your room clean in 10 minutes, and I'd come up there in a half hour and it still wasn't clean, and they disobeyed us, we would take them in their room, take down their pants, and just give them a couple hard smacks on the bottom. It has to hurt. The pain of the discipline has to hurt worse than the pleasure of the sin and disobeying, or else it doesn't work. If you just do it with your hand, it's not gonna work. It's gotta be painful. And that little strap was definitely painful, but it didn't leave bruises. And you do it on the bottom where there's nice padding. You're not gonna cause any bruising. We're completely against that. And then after the spanking, you just hug them and you talk to them about it, and you just tell them that we want your will to go be according with God's will and to obey Him. And when they're really young, it's us, but you're always steering them towards goodness and behaving properly and just being honest and good and speaking right and obeying the authority that's in their life, because your children's teachers, coaches, bosses, governments, it'll just benefit them the whole entire lives. Plus, as you discipline them, they will grow up to be self-disciplined and self-controlled. So this is so important, mothers, and it's so important for you to be home full time, because it takes a lot of consistency, a lot of effort on your part. You can't slack on it, because if you're really consistent for the first 3 years even, we didn't spank our children after 5 years old, so they don't even really remember. If you do it before 5 years old, they're not going to remember. So, and we hardly had to do it, because they knew when we said something that we meant it, and they weren't going to keep asking us over and over again. They knew when we said get in the car, they got in the car, and it just made raising children a pleasure. And it's so important. So make sure that your goal is to take away their selfish, stubborn will and make it a will after God that pursues hard after God and His will. Because we have 4 children now that walk in truth. They're good children. Their teachers, their coaches all loved working with them, because they obeyed them and they respected authority. And it's a really good gift you can give your children. So anyway, this is how we trained our children. And you can do it too, because God works mightily within you. Even those strong-willed children, we had one, and as they were older, it wasn't really a blatant discipline problem, but it was a thinking problem. My husband had to work with them a lot in their bad thinking, which was wonderful. You have to always move their bad thinking towards truth. Always use truth when they're bad. No, that's not what God says. That's not what His word. This is what God's word said. This is how you should be thinking. So even in high school, you're always teaching your children, pointing them towards the Lord. So this is, if you want godly children, the best chance at that. And then if they rebel, you just give it to the Lord and pray. Like this one youth pastor said, he never worries about a praying mother, because that child has a praying mother, and God hears the prayers, and that child will not be lost. So raise them good. Takes a lot of time and effort, but it's such a blessing. Yeah, such a blessing to have no greater joy than have your children walking in truth. Bye-bye.